All right. Hey, everybody. We're back. This is Dr. Craig Kasper from NYHD and the Institute for Hearing and Balance. And this is another episode in our Audiologist at Home episode series, where all of us, we're at home because we're not able to see patients in New York City because of what's going on with the coronavirus. But we are trying to bring you as much value as possible through some of these videos and answering questions that we get in our practice on a day-to-day basis. So again, today I have my colleague, Dr. Alexandra Zweig. What's up, Dr. Zweig?
Hi, guys. Hi. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Welcome back. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, every day we see each other more now than probably being in the office.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? Usually when we're in the office, we're kind of crossing paths. We're not necessarily we don't have necessarily too much time to have a conversation because we're so busy with patients. So this is a nice change of pace. So as I said, we're starting to with these videos, we've been kind of asking questions that we're getting, whether it's on a day-to-day basis in the practice or questions that people have been kind of sending in to us. And again, if you take a look at the bottom of the screen, info@newyorkhearingdoctors.com, you could send questions to us. We're trying to answer as many questions as we can through these videos. But today's question I thought was really interesting because, especially being a practice in New York City, we get these questions a lot. Everybody believes that they're exposed to so much noise throughout the course of their day and their lives. And we're here to try to answer some questions about what might be safe and what ultimately might be harmful to someone's hearing. So the question for today is, Dr. Zweig, what are your recommended limits for noise exposure? And how do we know if we've been in a hazardous environment for too long?
Okay, so yeah, this is definitely a question we get often, being that we deal with musicians, we deal with people just living in New York City, and then the whole concern of how loud are my headphones. So there are two, I would say, associations that have kind of recommended exposure limits when it comes to noise or occupational noise. One being OSHA, which is probably the more common one, which is the Occupational Safety and Health Association. And then there's NIOSH, which is a little bit more conservative, which I am going to talk about today because our practice tends to be a little more conservative with noise exposure since we deal with a lot of patients with tinnitus. And NIOSH is the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. So just for a little backstory of, I'm going to be talking about decibels, or dB, and that's just the unit that measures the degree of loudness or sound. So when I say that, I'm just talking about sound levels. So when we talk about sound levels or recommended sound levels, we talk about two components: how loud is the environment we're in, and then what is the duration of time that we're in that environment. So the recommended exposure level for NIOSH is 85 decibels of sound for 8 hours straight. So that is what your limit. Anything above that can be considered hazardous to our hearing or our auditory system. There is, so some people will say, okay, well, what if I am in a situation that's 94 decibels and I'm in that situation for 8 hours straight? How do I know what's acceptable? So there is what we call a 3 dB exchange rate to that. When we go from 85 decibels to 88 decibels, for example, 3 dB above 85, clearly, we cut that exposure time in half. So now 88 decibels, you can be exposed for 4 hours. Now that's your new threshold, and so forth. So 91 for 2 hours. Just to give kind of context of volume in general, an average conversational level is anywhere between 55 and 65 decibels. So if you think about 85, it's not extremely loud. And a rock concert, for example, could be 110 decibels. So whenever we talk about noise exposure, our goal is always to get a patient in the acceptable noise range. So whether it's through earplugs, musician plugs, whatever it may be, whatever environment they're in, we want to bring them into the level that is acceptable. So If they're exposed at 100 decibels, we want to bring them down 15 decibels to get them at 85 so they can be in that environment for 8 hours straight.
I think what's interesting is you're kind of describing a thermometer of noise here and of sound, right? And the louder or the more the greater the temperature, the shorter the time we're safe at that temperature, basically.
Yeah.
Um, so that's interesting. So one way that we have the ability to control our noises through something like earplugs.
Hmm.
Other things that we will occasionally tell patients is maybe they can distance themselves from the noise source.
Right.
So if there's like, for instance, New York City, like a jackhammer on the street, right?
Mhm.
We always tell them to kind of maybe put their fingers in their ears. That's not a bad thing to do, but you can step away from it. The further you are away from a noise source, the better you'll be in terms of what you're exposed to.
Right.
Um, so how do we know? So how do we kind of use this in the real world? So how do we know what if we're exposed to 85 decibels or above? Do you have some sort of a tool that we can use?
Yeah, so actually, there are really good apps on your phone, sound level meter apps, that will allow you to measure where you're standing, if the phone is obviously in your hand, what the decibel level is in that environment where you are. So that I always give that as a tip, when, especially musicians, when they're on stage with different instruments and potentially they're their singer or whatever it might be. They want to measure where they are on that stage. What is the noise level? So that would be true for a concert, any environment that you're in. You just use an app on your phone to determine what that sound level is in that environment. And now that you know kind of the exchange rate, you can figure out, okay, when am I safe in this environment, or do I need to do something additional to protect myself?
Sure. So we can even provide that exchange rate chart if people wanted to reach out to us at that info at newyorkhearingdoctors.com email address, and we'll be happy to send that off to anybody who is interested in kind of having that as a guideline. So we talked about knowing what our limits are
Mhm.
and understanding those guidelines, understanding through potentially using a sound level meter app on our phones, which is accurate. It's not 100% perfect, but it gives us definitely an idea of what we're exposed to. And then basically comparing, and then also doing things like wearing hearing protection and potentially distancing ourselves from a sound source will help as well. Now, one thing that patients will oftentimes kind of talk to us about are MP3 players, headphones. We're always connected through headphones nowadays. Those are things that we can. How do we use those guidelines with respect to that as well?
So there's actually which I was not aware of until recently. There's a health app on your phone that will tell you what your headphone volume is, and it will tell you if you're within a normal. I probably uses the OSHA standards, which is 90 decibels for 8 hours, but it will tell you if you're listening at hazardous volumes, or if you're within normal, as well as within that week, what was your spikes in listening to music. So I would use the health app to determine what your headphone volume is.
Oh, that's great. So it gives us a guideline without really having to even understand what the parameters are per se. We just have to look and see what the health app is telling us about our exposures for that period of time. That's great.
Yeah.
Cool. Anything else we want to talk about with noise for today?
Hopefully, New York City will go back to being really noisy soon.
Yeah, we're looking forward to that as well. So, again, we appreciate all you guys checking in. If you have questions for future videos, just like this one, please feel free to email us at info@newyorkhearingdoctors.com. And we'll be back most likely tomorrow with another video answering some questions that you guys sent our way. So take care, everybody. Take care, Dr. Zweig. It's good to see you again.
You too. Take care. See you tomorrow.
All right, we'll talk soon. Take care. Bye bye.